instrumentalities with lots of publicity. Next slide. They want to damage your infrastructure. Next slide. And they want to destroy symbolic symbols. With an attack on a church, they can get all this with little resistance. Churches and houses of worship have many people on worship day and are usually the cornerstone of most neighborhoods and communities. There are some of our nation's most symbolic structures dating back hundreds of years. Next slide, please. We're going to give you the tools today and resources to take back to your churches to better prepare to be resistant to these attacks on your house of worship. Next slide. Now we're going to get a little of the meat and potatoes. The first thing every church needs to do is make up a plan of what is important and what is a major thing to the church. So we're going to talk about a little bit about a written risk assessment plan. In your handouts that you got at the door, there are some web addresses. On those handouts, there's one called the Hope Begins Here. It's a Christian-based or a faith-based program out of Springfield, Missouri. They have all these forms electronically on their websites to do a step-by-step risk assessment plan. Next slide, please. With these resources on the website, we're going to show you how to harden your facility. Next slide, please. What is risk assessment? I want to read to you the definition from the U.S. government of what risk assessment is. Risk assessment is a step in a risk management process. It is the determination of qualitative and quantitative value of risk related to certain situations and a recognized threat, also called hazards. Quantitative risk assessment requires calculation of two components: risk and the magnitude of potential loss and the probability of that loss to occur. Next slide, please. This is a standard risk analysis chart. As you see on the bottom, as severity and consequences go up, such as damage to a structure or loss of a leader, increases. As long as the possibility of that does not increase, then severity does not go up. However, if the severity is important and the possibility of that incident occurring goes up, then the consequences become a much greater risk factor. Next slide. When you reach the possibility of something bad happening, and that something bad does happen, its impact on your facilities, then you are at a high risk. Next slide, please. Some of the things we're going to be able to teach you. With training, this could be one of your best security teams. I mean, how many of you have I don't pretend to know all of your denominations and everything, but how many of you have greeters or ushers in your congregations? With a little training, these people could be taught to be your front line of security. You can teach them to identify suspicious people. They can be like counselors. They can be trained to screen out troubled individuals. And now we're not telling you that these individuals should be turned away from your churches, but we're telling you screen these individuals, take them off the sides, counsel them, whatever your church doctrine tells you to do, but don't let them have free access to the main congregation. Next slide, please. Next slide. But these people can also do multiple roles. They could be taught to be trained in first aid, medical responses. Some of them may even be nurses and doctors that go to your church and can be trained to not only be screeners, but be medical first responders. Next slide, please. They can be your natural disaster team. Should there be an earthquake, a tornado, or whatever during service, they can be trained to be spotters and help your congregation seek shelter. Next slide, please. They can also be taught as weather advisors. These readers usually have the front of the building. They have access to windows, doors. They can be taught to identify risk factors and then alert the congregation and help them with evacuations during tornadoes, earthquakes, other disasters. Next slide. The other thing is, how many of you have some type of media or audio booth in your churches, such as we have back here? We have taught a lot of churches with a big congregation. Most video production booths go unnoticed because they sit in the back of the room or above the audience. And we can show you how to with use of a radio and a telephone installed in those things, they can be your emergency communication center to alert if incidents are happening. They can be taught to summon the police in an emergency. And those are usually not noticed by people coming into the congregation because they're outside. Next slide, please. The Missouri Department of Homeland Security is now sponsoring, at the request of the governor, a new faith-based Homeland Security initiative. On your handouts, you will find a web address for this resource. And also, all of these resources are in your handouts, and many others we are going to put on our MDU Public Safety website. That address is on your brochures as well. We're constantly, as we get new material, posting to the website. And also, I am one of the persons that's been asked to be on this governor's new faith-based initiative. So that's one of the reasons we are starting off here today with this program. Next slide, please. Now, also, you're going to hear from some community resource officers and that in the local government. One of the things that we would like to get across today, too, is natural disasters. Not only shootings, but they're very serious. But natural disasters can happen, and that the national statistics, as most of you have seen from hurricanes in the south and all that, when a major disaster happens, resources are very low. And what we would like to pass on to you is that every community has what they call a CERT training response, which is Community Emergency Response Team. The local government teaches you how to be a CERT responder. And I found out today that only about 1% of this nation's population are considered first responders. That 1% is going to be the ones that respond to the 99% that are the victims or the community. And what this program teaches you is how to be first responders. It is a known fact that if we had a major earthquake or tornado or some other unforeseeable disaster in Missouri, that you could be on your own for up to 3 days before resources got here. And a thing that we teach here at the university and that we'd like to see some of the churches teach is what they call CERT. Teach your community how to defend themselves and be on their own. Next slide, please. These are some of the resources that we are going to list for you. They are all in your handouts. Their websites, their addresses are all in the handouts, and it will also be listed on our web page. Next slide. Okay, does anyone have any questions for me? You're going to hear some experts today that talk about all these things.